Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Talking Acquisition. This is the weekly high-energy, informative, and slightly opinionated view on all things acquisition, procurement, and government contracting related. This is the place where the contracting community, the acquisition community, and our industry partners connect, talk, listen, and learn from each other. My name is William Randolph, and I am your host for today. And I would love to introduce my co-host, my colleague, my partner, my friend, Soraya Carrera. Hello, Soraya.
Hello, Will. How are you today?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing very good. If you see
Great.
a big smile on my face, it's because one of my former employees, someone who considers me a mentor and a role model, just recently got a promotion to procurement chief. And I got to tell you, whenever any of my people that I've mentored or people I've actually just talked to, get a promotion, it's exciting to me.
It
I
is.
love it, especially
It is.
when it's a Hispanic female.
Oh,
It's
awesome.
okay.
That is great.
Yeah, feeling
That
pretty
is
good
great.
today.
Well, congratulations to her.
Yes.
So, you want to get our disclaimer out of the way, and then we can dive right in.
Happy to do that. Happy to do that for us. Here we go. So our podcast shares information and views on a variety of topics that impact the federal acquisition community. Our goal is to provide thought leadership and perspective, not to criticize, judge, or render political opinions, although Will and I have been known to spew a few of those. We provide this free service because we are former federal acquisition professionals and leaders. We believe that the creativity, innovation, and effectiveness of our community is unleashed when we share knowledge, information, and learning. We hope you enjoy our podcast, and we welcome the views and comments of our colleagues across the private and public sectors. I also want to take a quick moment this morning, Will, because this is a very special week. Let's see. Wednesday, November 10th, is the Marine Corps birthday. Happy birthday to the Marine Corps.
Certified.
And most importantly, Thursday, November 11th, is Veterans Day.
Yes.
And I want to honor all of our veterans, thank them for their incredible service. And I also want to thank their families who also make the ultimate sacrifice with them. So a big thank you, a big shout out to our veterans. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for honoring our country. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Freedom is not free.
That's right.
Freedom is not free. All right. So, Soraya, I've got an interesting question I want to pose to you. Okay. Today's topic, I want to play the game of two wishes. Two wishes. Okay. So, Queen and King for the day. I'd like you to think about if there were two things that you could change, and let's do one at a time, but let's do two things you could change in the community, in the environment, in the craft. What would those two things be? Let's give us your first one. You have an idea of one you might want to change?
So you're only giving me two wishes, and anybody who knows me or whoever worked for me knows that she has far more on her list than two things. Okay? In fact, a lot of them used to go, "Slow down, woman, I can't wait." So my first wish would be, can I get 50 or 100 more, right? So that I can take care of everything. But all kidding aside, if I could change anything surrounding our workforce, the perception of our workforce. And I'm going to focus on that because I think we do a lot of things well in our community. I think in the federal government, we do a good job of training our folks. We provide good training, a lot of good mentoring programs. And here of late, we've even gotten just so much better. I think the pandemic has reinforced certain things that we didn't think about before, like getting the training to the person versus trying to get the person to the training, right?
Yes.
The other thing that you hear a lot of talk about is like just-in-time training and making sure that we're delivering the training in a way where the employee can use that training. So they train, they work, and then they go back and train again, and then they work. And I think those are all smart strategies, really smart. And focusing a little less on making you certified. Certified.
Right.
But,
different topic.
Yeah, that's another day, right? But focusing a little less on whether you have a certification as much as you have the credentials to do the job. So I do think we've done a lot of things, but what we haven't fixed yet, in my opinion, and I base this on discussions that I've had even recently at a couple of other forums, is the perception of public service and specifically of acquisition. The perception of public service is still not the greatest in the world, right? People still use terms like lazy bureaucrats and that kind of stuff, which I am
Yeah.
here to tell you, not the case at all whatsoever. But more importantly, in the acquisition community, there's still a perception that we're resistors, that we're resistant to doing things, that we're hesitant to take risks, that we tend to be the folks that say no, that we're more focused on compliance than delivery. So my first wish would be around that, to change that perception, right? Because it's not about changing the people, it's about changing how people see us. And some of that is changing the behaviors. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I do think that there is a misperception out there of who we are and what we do.
Interesting. I got a question. I want to dive in a little bit more on your perception. Where do you think the perception of today, understood that it's a desire to change it, but where does the perception of today come from? Is that external or is that internal, and it just permeates out? Where do you think the perception comes from? Today's perception.
I think it's both. I really do. From an external perspective, you don't read the good stories. Nobody publishes the great stories, the great thing. And if they do, they publish them in like trade rags, right? You don't really read about in the cover of the Washington Post. They don't talk about the fact that the Procurement Innovation Lab that I stood up at DHS recently won the Deming Award. Let me use that one as an example. That's prestigious. Did anybody talk about that? Do you see that on the front page of the book? No. But if somebody at DHS actually took a lollipop from a contractor, that would be on the front page of the book. I know I'm exaggerating, but there's truth to that. That the bad story gets out, not the good story. The real story about what people do, what they achieve, the accomplishments that they make. The fact that we award close to 40% of DHS procurement dollars to small business. Those stories don't get out unless people like you and I are out there telling them, or the people that work there are telling the story. And so I think the perception, that's the external side. Internally, somebody has one bad experience with one contracting officer, they paint the whole organization with that. I can't tell you how many times people will call me up with the same damn anecdote. And a couple of times, being that, I'm shy and not unwilling to challenge, right? There were a couple of times when I said, and in what year did that happen? Who was the CEO? Give me the name of the CEO that did that to you. Oh, they're not even on my staff anymore. They don't even work here anymore. But because you had this bad experience 10 years ago, 5 years, whatever the heck it was, now that's become the recurring story. And so I think it's a little bit of both. And I think we have to help ourselves. I can't tell you how many times I used to tell the staff, we have to listen to ourselves when we're talking to the customer. We have to think about how we approach a customer when they say, I want to do X, Y, Z. Are you saying, no, you can't do that? Or are you saying, let me take a look at that. I'm not sure that we can do it that way, but here are some alternatives. That's the way the conversation should flow. What I used to tell the staff all the time was, if you're going to say a hard no, that comes from me. Because you got to come and explain to me why that's a hard no, can't do it. And then I'm happy to go to the customer and say, I'll be your bad guy. But don't go out there and start with no. I worked with a guy that led with no. And he was my customer and he subsequently became my employee. So imagine that, right? He was having fun. Anyway, but he led with no. He would end up doing whatever it was we wanted. A lot of times, even how we wanted. But the opening salvo was no, you can't do that. And like, dude, after about the third time, I said, dude, you're going to do it. So why don't you start with, let me think about it, right?
Gotcha.
He would always say no.
Good stuff. Okay, so my first wish would be for our community to increase its level of embrace to technology.
I love it.
From a standpoint of, we have some emerging technologies in the space now, robotic processing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing. I think all of these tools, and I truly mean these as tools, can be used to leverage the contracting officer, the contracting specialist, the acquisition team. They can be leveraged by that team to increase value.
Sure.
I think there's a conversation that's being had, and it's a replacement conversation.
Right.
And that's the piece that I want to get out of the conversation, that this is not a replacement for that machine learning and artificial intelligence don't ever take the human out of the equation. It just accelerates and enhances the capability of the human. So that's my first wish, is that the community stops for a moment and really thinks about how these new technologies, these digital services, IT technologies, can be used to leverage our craft, leverage our thinking, leverage our capability, and that we get out of the conversation of replacement. This is not a zero-sum game, one or the other. I think it's both.
So you raise a valid point, and by the way, that was my second wish. You stole me. So I got to think of a new one. So I got to make conversation. No, just kidding. But that was my second wish. I'm a huge advocate of the use of technology to enhance our capabilities. And you said it right, to leverage, right? And the way I like to think about it is it makes us more efficient. If I can eliminate those tedious tasks that we have to do, because we have to put together a contract file, we have to go out and research databases and make sure that people aren't appearing in certain databases, we have to get data, we have to do data, we have to grab data out of various systems to do our analytics to determine whether or not we can award, should award to a particular company. To understand the market, we have to pull data. So there's so many uses of the technology to simplify our lives, get us information, because I always tell people, we got a ton of data out there. We got to convert that into information that we can use to do our analytics. And so I think it does promote the efficiency of the workforce, and it isn't a replacement. And in fact, if you listen to most of the people out here that are talking about the use of technology, the organizations that are implementing technology, whether you talk about Department of Interior, I was recently at the George Mason Contract Symposium, and Interior talked about some of the stuff that they're doing with robotic process automation. And they talked about that very principle. It's not a replacement. It's to enable them, to enhance them. And in fact, most of the ideas of how to automate, they're coming from the people. If people do this right, they're coming from the staff themselves. Agreed. But I'm with you. I think so. One of the problems, now I'm going to throw out number 2 for me.
Okay.
The people would fund us. The last organizations that get funded in federal government are typically that management side of the house.
Yes.
A lot of agencies, you know, and for obvious reasons, you fund your operational side first. You got to take care of the mission. I got it. But people don't always fund equivalently. I'm going to use that word, not equally, equivalently. If you're giving a rise in dollars to the operational side of the house, then it stands to reason they're going to use more resources. They're going to need more things. So procurement and finance and logistics, all these organizations that are what is considered today mission support, and that does include IT, are going to need some level of funding increase. I'm not going to say equal. There are some that think that. I don't. But there's some level of increase that needs to happen simultaneously so that we can continue to serve that need. And that's probably the single biggest reason that you don't see that embracing of automation, because when you have to figure out what you're going to fund, what are you going to fund first? Your business training or the tools, right?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it makes sense. You know, I have begun to use the analogy of the Iron Man suit when we have conversations about technology, is that I see all of these process tools truly as the Iron Man suit. When you think about that superhero genre, Iron Man, the suit is just the suit. It still needs Tony Stark inside. It's a person inside. And all the suit does is accentuate the knowledge, thinking, capability. It's leverage. It's leverage.
It gives more power to what the capabilities of that person is.
Absolutely. But you still need the person in the suit. So that's the conversations that I like to have, that framework when we think about automation and leveraging automation. And when you talk about the investments, you know, it has boggled my mind my entire career that the acquisition community touches just about every dollar through going through the system, but yet the investments that could elevate the operational effectiveness, it's like pulling teeth. get to make the investments in those areas. So yeah, I totally get it.
So one of the things that I was seeing just before I left over the last couple of years, especially, I think you saw some of this even at ICE. What I've seen is the procurement community coming together much better, the procurement community across government. And I give some credit to OFP. OFPP has done a really good job of, they always have their CAO council that brings us all together.
Right.
But what I've seen is more sharing of information and capability.
Yep.
Where I could pick up the phone and call my friends at Treasury and say, hey, I hear you got a RPA bot that does blah. Can I come see it? Can you tell me how you did it, right?
Let me play with it.
I think that's a way of leveraging capability, because the other thing that I would add to the embracing of technology, I would say not only to leverage our capabilities, but to promote greater consistency. Because if we're nothing, okay, we are inconsistent in government. Okay?
Yeah.
And I saw that when I became the head of contracting and Office of Procurement Operations. Depending on where you hired people from, they did things very different.
Oh, absolutely.
Very, very differently, right?
Yeah.
The way they looked at, even their philosophy of how to do things was different. We followed the same rules, which I think is amazing, right? Most of us are FAR-based with a few exceptions, right? Yeah. We're FAR-based, Federal Acquisition Regulation based. I don't want people to think that I just talk in acronyms. Anyway, but we're FAR-based, and yet we do everything so differently.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be so different. It really doesn't, right?
It doesn't.
You can bring about a lot of consistency. And so that was one of the things that I really was pushing very hard as the chief procurement officer at DHS. And when I went to like CAO council meetings, and when I was talking to my counterparts, let's see what we can do sharing our approaches, our processes, so that we could hopefully promote consistency. Because frankly, go talk to a small business and see what they tell you. I got to figure out how to do business with DOD. I got to figure out how to do business with DHS, with GSA. It really is different to them. We look different, and we act different, and we do things differently. So consistency is the other reason that technology becomes extremely important, because done right, we could push for more consistency in how we do things.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Okay, so I'm going to go to my second wish, and you touched on it a little bit when you spoke of the FAR. My second wish is about the FAR not being seen as a recipe book.
All right, I'm a smacky man. That was my other one. I got a good one, and you're not going to take it.
What I'm thinking is, or what my mind goes is, I think early in acquisition careers, I know this was my journey, so I'll only speak about my journey. In the beginning, one looks at the regulatory body of policies that we have, and early it was bifurcated for me. These are things you can do, your shalls, and then you have a body of shall nots, things you can't do. And that you take those two, and you take those two bodies of information, of policy guidance and direction, and then you go create activity within the shalls and shall nots.
Right.
What has evolved, at least for my thinking over time, and what I have seen play out, and especially for those acquisition and contracting professionals that bring extraordinary value to the environment and to the craft, instead of halves, I like to call it quarters. There's about a quarter that is shall not. Clear shall not. Don't do this stuff. There's a quarter that is about shalls. Here's some shalls, these are things you do. But that 50%, those 2 quarters in the middle, are just open to interpretation. That's where the magic happens. So I would love, again, my magic wand moment is that we get out of the 50% shalls, 50% shall nots. It's a recipe book that's like add water, milk, eggs, powder, stir, and you get a contract. Get out of that thinking and thinking of it as, here are the bumpers. Stay out of this area. Do these as much as you want to, but in the middle, be creative, be thoughtful, be curious, even in terms of molding that middle to the benefit of programs and mission. That's my number two. What are your thoughts?
So I 100% agree with that, right? That excuse me, you're right. And I don't know if it's even a quarter. The shall nots are really pretty basic. If you really stop and think about it, and I know this is going to sound bizarre to some of the folks that are not, even to some of the practitioners of the FAR, but some who are not practitioners, the shall nots are pretty easy. It's about
pretty intuitive.
Dollar wisely, right?
Yeah.
It's about not lining your own pockets. It's about not showing favoritism, not unduly restricting competition. They're pretty basic stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think to a certain extent, a lot of it's pretty common sense. Certainly, you got to read the rule because sometimes, you got subtle nuances about what you got to do and who you got to go talk to and that kind of stuff, right? But the point is that the intent and spirit's pretty basic stuff, right? So for the shall nots, pretty easy. And the shalls are also pretty easy because they're pretty much in your face, right?
Intuitive,
You shall set aside for small business. You shall go to the Small Business Administration if you don't think they're really a small business, right? They're pretty basic. If you think there's a violation of labor law, you go to the Labor Department. Those are pretty basic as well. So I think a lot of them in those formative years, if they're taught the way you described, the shalls, the shall nots, and the shalls, pretty easy stuff. And that stuff in between is about using your noogie, right? About making sure that you take the intent and spirit of the shalls and the shall nots and apply them to your thinking in this middle ground, because that's really what it's about. When I take this action, will I unduly restrict competition, or will I cause people to question the validity of the taxpayer dollar going to this, right? Am I violating any rules of engagement? Am I unduly treating somebody who had a poor past performance, one poor past performance reference, unfairly, right? Because that's what the tenets are. It's about fairness. It's about competition. It's about engendering, I always like the phrase, engendering the public trust.
Yeah, that's the job.
Somebody peeking in the window, right? When somebody peeks in the window, are they going to go, "Ooh, she's doing bad things," or are they going to say,
"That's the job"? Yeah.
But by the way, I come from the school of thought, don't make them peek in the window. Be transparent.
Absolutely.
That way I don't have to look at little probing eyes, right?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I really like that language of don't make them peek. If you show up knowing, and I had one of my bosses say early in my career, he says, when you think no one's looking, 3 people are looking.
All of them.
Okay, and they're taking notes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And today they got cameras.
And video. That's right.
They're getting the video.
That's right. Exactly. So why not embrace transparency?
Agreed.
And build strategies and solutions that will withstand the test of transparency. So yeah, I'm a biggie on that one.
Just adding on to that, on the whole transparency piece, that's why I'm a huge advocate of what I call true acquisition planning, not the act of writing a document, but the act of really planning the acquisition and bringing industry in as early as possible. As soon as you have a concept, an idea, saying, here's what we're thinking about, and give them an opportunity to see it, hear it, and talk to you about it and tell you what they think, right? And you're not going to please everybody. There's always going to be somebody out there who says, I don't like it. That's not the point. The point is you throw it out there and see what people's perception is of what you're saying you're going to do. Because unfortunately, we do live in a world where perception becomes reality. So whether you're intending something bad, doesn't matter. If people perceive it as not good, that's going to be your reality. And that's what people are going to judge you on. All right.
So your number 2, did you have a number 2?
My number 2, since you took all mine. No, I talked about people, so let's put another P in there, the protest process. My second wish would be that we could improve the protest process, not eliminate. There are many people in our profession that want to eliminate the protest. No, absolutely not. We are a country that is built on the concept of fairness. We really are about giving people opportunity. And I believe the protest process is really about opportunity. It's about giving industry an opportunity to bring to our attention if they believe that we were flawed in our process, whether it was the solicitation that has flaws in it, where you unduly restrictive requirements or other issues, or in the actual decision-making process, how you evaluated the proposal, or even how you came to your decision or the decision that you made. There's fairness to that, and I'm fine. What I think, though, needs to happen is there has to be a little bit more fairness, because some people, not all, I never say 100%, some people have taken it to an extreme where they protest everything and repeatedly protest because they think they'll wear you down. Or worse yet, they're protesting because they're mad, not because you did something wrong, but because they're not happy. And they're also protesting because they know that in the protest, the government has to be transparent. So we give up a lot of information, and maybe I'll find a little nugget in there, right? I'll file this initial protest. Now I'll get your file. And now maybe I'll find a little nugget that I can add. And those are the things that I think cause consternation, because when people talk about, oh my God, the procurement process is slow. And I think about this a lot because people, the process is slow. It does seem slow. If, as a program manager, I thought it was slow. Right. When I was in program, right? And I worked the process, but I know what slows the process down. We're trying too hard sometimes to protest proof the procurement. Between the attorney, the contracting officer, and sometimes even the program manager, we're trying to protest proof it. And there's no such thing. It's like I always tell people, you cannot get that. Just think about it. All you can do is try to write a really good procurement, communicate it effectively, and hopefully gain the trust of the industry so that they don't feel they have to protest. Because sometimes industry feels they have to protest because you're not listening, or they feel that you're not listening. So protest proof is not, somebody actually said that to me one time, and I went, what are you talking about?
What is that?
Right. Come on, get real, right? And by the way, my advice was always to my employees, what I used to say, do not tell me that you're writing a great procurement that will never get protested. You assume you will get a protest and factor that in. Factor it into your timeline, factor it into your thinking. I'm probably going to get a protest, right? Don't worry about it. You're going to get it. And you're probably going to win it. If you do a good job on the procurement, you will probably win, especially if you sync up your teams. So if I could, my wish would be to enhance that process, to do some things to make it less time consuming, less adversarial, less predictable. I'm going to say that word, predictable, right? So things like, you heard me talk in one of our previous podcasts, maybe charging a fee to file a protest. Maybe even doing a step before you can file a protest where you demonstrate to the government what you think was done wrong. Because a lot of times when you file these protests, you don't really have to demonstrate what you think was wrong. You just have to charge, right? Yeah. And then we get to tell you what we did right because we're guilty till proven innocent. Did I say that? Oh, but that slipped out. But it's true. You're proving your innocence, right? And then in doing that, people are pulling information. And then the other thing is cutting down on the steps in the process, right? You file a protest, you lose, you only get one appeal, and that's it. Done. Game finito. And it's called an appeal. You don't get to go bounce to another court and say, well, I didn't like the way GAO thought of that, so I'm going to come over here. Because a lot of people do that. They do.
Absolutely. You mentioned something that I learned really early in my career is that the pain is in the supplemental protest. It's like the first one is just to get the data. You just link two things you talked about, the data, how valuable data is. But the first protest is simply just to get the information. And then the supplemental one, that number two, is the one that will hit you in the shorts, sometimes. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I've even in my training work now, we talk about protest resiliency. It's not proofing. It's when it comes, can you defend yourself? That's the place you want to be. You want to be highly resilient in your strategy and in your execution, and so that when it shows up, and when plan for it, when it shows up, you're ready to defend. You're ready to defend. Yeah.
Well, that's why I push really hard for talking to industry early, because you will find out what are the things that cause consternation for industry. And some of them are really valid. They just look awkward or they sound awkward. It's not that you're going to do it wrong. It's just wow, that doesn't sound right to
Different.
me.
Yeah.
In this industry, why would you do that? And you want to hear that conversation. You want to understand what's gonna be the bugaboo. And by the way, you know who's gonna protest and who isn't. Right? I used to joke around about that. I was like, hey, just give me the list of companies. I'll tell you exactly who's gonna protest on this one. Because you kind of know, you really
Yeah.
do. There are some people that just make it a career trade, but there's also, by the nature of the company, they're either new to the government, they don't really understand the process, or they're companies that they don't get why we do certain things the way we do. And I think it is upon us to educate industry.
Educate. Yeah, agreed.
You got to educate them, right? You got to help them understand why we do. What do we mean when we say best value? And then the other thing is we got to make sure our people are using the processes correctly, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen best values that turn into LPTAs, which drives me nuts.
Nuts. Yeah. Why go through all the pain, and then end up being with this strategy? Yeah.
And for those who are listening to our podcast, it's not that I try to sit in the middle. It's because the truth is always in the middle, right?
Yeah,
we have our extremes. The industry has we all have extremes. Like the political parties, you got extremes, but somewhere in the middle is where we want to be. And I think in the protest process, I am an advocate of protest. I will never take that process. I would never advocate for taking it away, never. And I've talked to people that go, oh, it should just be eliminated. I'm like, no, the government is not sovereign. We make mistakes. Yeah. And we need to own up and step up to our mistakes and treat industry with fairness. That said, we have to introduce more fairness to that process. And by the way, one of the things that I hate about, well, I shouldn't say this. One of the things that I don't like that I've seen happening, the trend that I see, corrective action. Now we take corrective action on anything. You're missing a piece of paper in the file. We're taking corrective action. Stop, freeze. We got to take corrective action. The corrective action has become the crutch to trying to perfect the file, to sometimes not even making an argument. And that really bothers me. If I did the right thing, even if I'm going to lose, let me stand up and make my argument of why I did it. And the corrective action stops you from doing that. And it seems to be, in some cases, not always, in some cases, I've seen it used as a crutch because, well, they might not like our argument. Well, we might lose the protest. Right. Well, we don't want to go and make it. I'm like, no, you get paid to make that argument. Get your butt in there and make that argument, right?
Yeah,
so
that's true. One of the attributes of this job is all the guts you have and all the guts you can borrow. It takes guts to do this work.
Yeah, and we do have to make the argument, and we do have to defend the decisions that we make, and I think it's appropriate. But I think if we could do a better job on the acquisition planning front, we talked about this in one of our previous episodes, that if you do a better job and you're presenting these things early on, and you're gaining that trust from industry when you're conversing with them. And they know you're not going to do everything the way they tell you to do it. They get that. They just want to know that you heard them and that you thought about what they said and that it makes sense. And some of them will say, you know what, I'm not going to pursue that. That's going to be too hard. And that's fair to them as well. Fair. Because a lot of times the protest is because they spent a ton of money writing a proposal because you gave them a really complex solicitation. They spent a ton of money and somebody's job may be on the line.
Right.
So I get it. There's a human side to this stuff,
Yep. All right,
so
Soraya.
You good on that second wish?
Oh, perfect. All right.
Rolling into technology.
Well, as we always say, the hard part is stopping because like you, I've got a couple more in my pocket if I had the opportunity to share. But we're at golden nugget time, and again, every time we like to leave the community. Our GovCon larger community with a golden nugget or two. So you have a golden nugget for the day based on what we've been talking about today?
Sure. So I have two golden nuggets.
Okay. Overachiever.
Well, I had to get even, right? I have two golden nuggets. The first one is you don't have to be queen or king for the day to do things better. You don't.
You just got me back. That was mine.
Isn't that? No, seriously, you don't.
You don't.
You can do great things where you sit. One person does make a difference. I believe that. I have always believed that throughout my career. And that's why I wasn't afraid to step up and to invite people to step up and to support them when they step up. Because you don't have to be king or queen for a day to make a difference, to make a change, to do things a little bit better, a little bit wiser, and a little bit more efficiently. So that's nugget number one. My second nugget is please, please, please don't ever forget public service is noble. We are here to serve the public. That's why it's called public service. And so we have to bring trust into our environment. We have to be transparent. What we do impacts so many. It's about delivering on that mission, but it's also about making sure that we followed the rules, that we did the right things to get that mission delivered, that we don't get our government in trouble. So that's my second nugget, but you don't have to be king or queen for the day to do the right thing.
Awesome, awesome. And my nugget is I'm gonna lean a little bit on your first about perceptions, and that we in the community own the perceptions.
Yes.
Okay. We need to do the work to own the perceptions. People will have perceptions. External organizations, entities, our distractors and detractors will have perceptions. We need to lean into and live into what the perceptions that we want from our community. Walk it and then talk it. So lean into the perceptions. Don't leave them to chance.
That's right. No, 100% agree. And remember that perception is reality.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
okay.
Then you're great.
There you go. There you go. And with that, another one in the books. Thank you, Soraya.
Hey,
amazing conversation.
Always a pleasure. Always good fun to talk to you, and always love these topics.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll see everyone next week.
Next week. Take care. Have a great one. Happy Veterans Day.